A trade deal between African countries and the United States is about to expire, putting hundreds of thousands of jobs at risk. A White House official says the Trump administration supports extending the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, but only by a year. AGOA gives 32 sub-Saharan countries, including South Africa, Nigeria and Kenya, access to the US market. It enables them to export thousands of products like cars, textiles and food duty-free. US imports under AGOA totaled nearly $10 billion in 2023. The pact has been the centerpiece of US economic engagement with Africa for the past 25 years. And I'm now joined by Aly-Khan Satchu. He's a Kenyan financial analyst and advisor. Now, give us a sense of how important AGOA is for African economies, which countries have and industries have benefited the most there.
So it's not important for all African countries, but it carries significant importance for a number. For example, South Africa is a big beneficiary of the AGOA agreement. Other countries, smaller countries like Lesotho, large apparel exports into the US. Kenya, for example, as well, had a big textile sector exporting into the US. But basically, as you said earlier, it's the number of exports, quantum is about $10 billion. And just to give you a sense of it, exports into China from these same countries is about $130 to $140 billion. But it was a flagship agreement by the US administration. And I think, that has caused a shock effect on the African continent, that they're really being cut loose by the Americans.
Now, there has been talk of a one-year extension, but not much clarity or public commitment from the Trump administration. From your perspective, would a short-term renewal be helpful or just add more uncertainty?
I think this is part of the problem, and that policymaking vis-a-vis Africa and the US is now very short-term and is prone to enormous volatility. You can't really make medium-term to long-term investment decisions based upon a one-year extension of an existing agreement. And I think that's the challenge. So I'm sure there'll be a relief factor, but in terms of further investments directed into the US market, I don't think this is going to help at all.
And what would happen if AGOA disappears or is significantly scaled back? What would be the consequences for those countries?
So I think specifically for countries which have relied heavily on AGOA, like Madagascar, like Lesotho, it's going to be seriously detrimental. It's going to be a very, very big hit for those economies. You saw Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa make that visit to the White House. It's also an important agreement for the South Africans. But I think essentially they're going to have to pivot. They're going to have to pivot east, which African countries have already been doing. And as you know, China introduced a tariff-free agreement itself with 33 African countries. And I think as a counterweight and a message to African countries that, look, we can do some more heavy lifting on your behalf. And of course, African countries are now going to be relying heavily on the implementation of the African Free Trade Agreement, which is designed to bring free trade across the African continent. But there again, the implementation will be key.
Now, what about the other side? What about the United States themselves? Would they notice the effects if the trade deal ended?
I think it's negligible, and I think this current administration is looking at things bilaterally. So you've got this big investment going into the Lobito corridor to export minerals out of the DR Congo via Angola across the Atlantic. You've got talk of other investments that they're looking to make, but essentially I think it's highly transactional and essentially looking at things through a very much a bilateral prism. I think, unfortunately, it's not really policy making for the next decade. It's policy making on behalf of the US for the now. And I think in that context, Africa's size is its major challenge. It just does not feature on the US radar in any meaningful way.
But wouldn't that be an own goal for the US in the medium term even, looking at how China is getting a bigger and bigger foothold across Africa?
It's extraordinary to me. I mean, if you look at the population of Africa, it is the next consumer market. Although we're starting from a very low base, the only way is upwards. I think it's a very short-sighted decision by the United States to do this. I think it makes no sense. It largely cedes the ground entirely to China. Mm-hmm. And you probably saw recent data coming out of China. Chinese exports into Africa have surged 25% year on year. A lot of infrastructure-type machinery going into the continent. So absolutely, I think it's a short-sighted, near-term decision which will bear medium-term consequences.
The financial analyst Aly-Khan Satchu there, talking to us from London. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.